It's time!
Kicking everybody. We are back for another episode of Pickin' Fights. I'm Keith, joined as always by my friend Tom. Tom, how are you today?
Kicking back, relaxing in the sun, sunny Myrtle Beach. It's a great day outside. Excited to get to it. But first, we got some awesome fights to talk about. And before we even get into the UFC side of things, it's topical, it's pertinent. Francis Ngannou, let's talk about it. But first, how you doing this Sunday?
I'm doing well. Sort of disappointed in the outcome of that fight in terms of I'm not disappointed in Francis Ngannou at all. That was a great performance by him to go in there against Tyson Fury and now potentially be ranked in boxing. I do feel like the UFC missed out on this quite a bit because just with how well the event went and how well Francis performed, and now they could potentially, especially with the combination of the WWE and they're talking about doing their own boxing thing.
Right.
I just think the whole situation could have gone better for the UFC, but the only way it could have gone better for Francis was if he got the W, because he knocked down Tyson Fury, definitely damaged him more. But boxing is a rigged sport, and they can't have Tyson Fury going into his already announced, I think it's a December fight against Alexander Usyk, with a loss to Francis Ngannou. He is the current heavyweight champion, WBC, of the world. So definitely rigged. They're in, where was it, Saudi Arabia?
No, they were in Turkey, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, it was a whole production. They had a ring that they didn't show for some reason, and Kamaru Usman and Israel Adesanya walked out Francis, which was cool, along with Mike Tyson, which is you see them in an alleyway, turn around.
Get out of there.
Yeah. So the production, they even brought out Kanye West. I haven't seen Kanye West in public. Not that I'm a paparazzi guy or anything or watching TMZ, but when was the last time you saw a clip of Kanye West anywhere?
Right.
So they were definitely shelling out the money to bring those types of people in. And so the event's going to go the way that they need it to. And unless Francis flat out knocked out Tyson Fury, out cold,
which he almost did.
Yeah, then he was not going to walk away with a W in this fight. That's just how boxing is. So in a way, I'm glad the UFC wasn't involved in that aspect of it, because there's already bad enough judging associated with them. But
yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, and I think that's maybe in part why Dana White has been so reluctant to get back into boxing, is because of how political the entire organization, the entire thing is just kind of choreographed by a couple of people to manufacture an outcome that's going to be the most lucrative. And I think that's what we saw last night, is even though Francis Ngannou went out there and he made a great case in 10-8 round, got the knockdown, he won a good amount of those rounds too. I think he made a fantastic case for winning that fight, and probably should have won that fight if there wasn't the contingency that there was plenty of money to be made, both from now him being a top-ranked boxer, being in the top 10 potentially. I think they even mentioned to him, I forget who it was, I think the WBO had mentioned to him, a representative, that he's going to be ranked in the top 10. So, there's money to be made from that, but also having Tyson Fury fight, in December as well. If he's not undefeated, if he is not, the Tyson Fury that everyone expects him to be, or he doesn't have that reputation, a lot of that money goes out of the window. So you got to understand that they made a business decision. And Francis can cry all he wants, but I think he's more or less playing a role, because he has to go into that fight, go into boxing, knowing that there's a specific outcome that's going to come, and he has to start Tyson Fury, to which he did. And I wonder how much of that encounter, how much of the fight is not necessarily choreographed, but the outcome is kind of expected in a certain degree. Hey, we expect this to go the distance. We expect a good fight here. And maybe Tyson went a little bit too far by Ngannou went a little too far by knocking him down. Who knows, how the politics get into the actual fight. But I think I knew as soon as, pretty much going into it, that Francis is probably not. I didn't hear. Let me rephrase that. I didn't expect Francis to go in there and be anywhere near as competitive as he was. Once the fight started to get close and it got into the later rounds, the 6th, the 7th, the 8th, I expected, well, of course, if this is anywhere close, they're going to give it to Tyson Fury, because there's a lot more money to be made with him being undefeated than there is if Francis Ngannou then beats him, then what do you rematch again for the WBO? And then Tyson is going to beat him because he's the more technical boxer. He takes it more serious, and that whole encounter was for nothing. So I don't think that that's where the money play was. I think maybe you could potentially have Francis go and fight somebody else, knock out a top 10 boxer, and then have the rematch for the actual, because again, it's not like Francis became the new heavyweight champion of the world and take belt of Tyson Fury. It was only for that one belt. So they could potentially rematch in the future. And that's the way these boxing guys are thinking, is about, the future in the long game.
Well, they had already announced Fury and Usyk 2 weeks ago, which already tells you what the outcome is going to be to begin with. Like, I made money on Tyson Fury by decision last night because the way I thought it was going to go was Francis goes out there in the first couple of rounds, tires out, and then Tyson carries until the end. But, and just maybe that would be how it was scripted or whatever. It wouldn't be as competitive as it was. But yeah, that's how you knew what the outcome was going to be all for it, because they weren't going to have him going for that fight with Usyk, which is going to be even bigger than this one, and have him go in off a loss to an MMA guy. But one thing I'm really interested to see, though, is the PFL going forward. Like now they have Jake Paul. They have Francis Ngannou, potentially Nate Diaz. We'll see. But guys that are doing like the boxing and, we haven't seen either of them fight in MMA and the PFL yet, but they're under contract. Is the PFL going to become like a hybrid thing as well, where they do like this boxing, MMA on the side, or MMA with boxing on the side? Because now we've seen like Showtime is going away, and Showtime is no longer with Bellator or Showtime Boxing. So there's like definitely vacancies for whoever's going to step up and do that. I think the UFC is going to get at it first, but the PFL does have boxers now technically under contract. So I guess in a way they're first, but I think there's windows there for all those companies to step up.
Yeah, one championship too.
Yeah, they have the Muay Thai.
Right, they're already doing a lot of crossover stuff with. I think it's either combat jiu-jitsu or straight up jiu-jitsu. They're doing kickboxing, and they did those alternating rounds with Demetrius Johnson. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen. But speaking of MMA, and as we continue to kind of move that direction towards the conversation, or move that conversation towards that direction rather, UFC coming up this weekend. At first, I remember we were talking about it. We're like, it's kind of like a mid card, especially after, with all of the news swirling around about John Jones and Stipe Miocic now being canceled, stepping in Tom Aspinall, Sergey Pavlovich, probably a better fight for us. But with all that swirling news around, and with everything that happened with Kamaru Usman and Hamzat Chimaev, and unfortunately Alexander Volkanovski and Islam, like, we've kind of forgot about this card, and there's some quiet bangers on this card as well. And we were going through them. I'm actually pretty excited about this weekend. What about yourself?
Yeah, I am too. The main card has like a lot of familiar faces, and oddly enough, it's like there's a couple of guys that tend to pop up on the same cards. I don't know if they have the same agent, or they have, they just rely on like similar training cycles and resting cycles or something. But a couple of these guys we're going to see like over and over again on cards together, like Caio Borralho and Armin Petrosyan. Those guys have fought each other, and then they popped up on a couple of cards together too.
The Bonfim brothers.
Yeah, the Bonfim brothers. Yeah, exactly. But they tend to do this with these more international cards, and I believe this one is taking place in Brazil.
Yep, UFC Sao Paulo.
Yeah, very nice. Yeah, I'm excited for this one. And we have Derek Lewis coming off a big W with that flying knee. Now main eventing fight night again. He's had such a fluctuation in terms of like where he lands on the cards, because like a few cards ago he was on like the prelims, and I think the last card maybe he was on the prelims too. But then he went out there and he did his thing with that flying knee, and now he's main eventing yet again. Knockout record holder, I believe, still. Just one of the all-time greats. So I'm excited for it.
With that being said, before we get into the main card, we have to start off on the prelims. So why don't we start off with our prelim notables? What do you think?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Prelim notable number one that I want to start off with is going to be Angela Hill versus Denise Gomez. Denise Gomez, you may remember her from her most recent fight. Let me change the zoom here so we can actually see all of their credentials. Denise Gomez, you may remember her from our last fight where she knocked out up-and-coming competitor and contender Yasmin Yereguay, who was undefeated up until that point 3 months ago. She also was a knockout win over Bruna Brazil via right hook to ground strikes 5 months ago. She lost a tight decision to Luma Lukbume, who had a high kickboxing prowess herself. Not great ground game, but high kickboxing prowess. And went out in there and stood and banged with her for 3 straight rounds and lost a tight decision to Luma. Got on, of course, with a decision win over Rayana Dos Santos. So it feels like every time we see Denise Gomez, especially being 23 years old, she's constantly improving, going from that back and forth matchup with a kickboxing, I don't want to say an icon, but someone who grew up in Thailand, Luma Lukbume, who had a lot, like hundreds of kickboxing fights, going there and sharing the octagon with her and then translating that over, improving her skills and getting knockouts over the likes of people like Yasmin Yereguay, who is young in her own right. But I think it just shows where Denise Gomez is in her career. And she's going against Angela Hill. Overkill Hill has not had the best stretch. I know she's 2-3 over her last 5, but I think if we actually look at her record, it actually gets a little bit worse than that on that run. I mean, if you look over her last, I think this is 6 here. She's 2-4 over her last 6. And then there's a couple more losses the more you go back down. She does have that win over Luma in 2020, but I think Luma at that time, she was 4-1 in MMA and I think was like 19, 20, 21, 22 years old and young in her own right. So a lot of losses on the record of Angie Overkill Hill, 15-13. She's at 38 years old. She's been in a couple different divisions. She's definitely a pinnacle when it comes to UFC women's MMA as someone who's just been around the block for a long time. But I don't think she has anywhere near the striking ability to compete with Denise Gomez here. I think we could potentially see Angie Overkill get knocked out. I think it might be one of the first times in her career, but I could definitely see a knockout coming here for the 23-year-old who's constantly improving, going out there in front of her home crowd, looking to put on a show. So I expect Denise Gomez to get this one finished in the first round, maybe even the second round by knockout, or if at the absolute least a unanimous decision win for Denise Gomez. What do you think, Keith?
Bold call with the potential knockout in the first round, but I like it. I'm definitely not against it. I'm sure there's money to be made there. There's a really great line like early in the week for Denise Gomez. Remember, this is Sunday. We're about a week out from this card. So if you consider yourself a sharp, I feel like getting in on Denise Gomez now at, what is that, minus 135. Not a bad line at all, especially like if you can get that knockout line too now. Big fan of the striking, and you don't see a lot of knockouts in women's MMA unless like the girls have true power. And we're starting to see some girls with like real knockout power coming up these days, and Denise Gomez is certainly one of them. Angela Hill has a lot of fight miles on her at this point. She's starting to slowly degrade as time goes on a little bit, and Denise Gomez, young, hungry, up and coming, strong. Angela Hill, pretty much on her way out at this point, I would have to imagine. But yeah, I'm rolling with you on Denise Gomez by knockout.
Awesome. Yeah. Moving up to the next fight, I have Victor Petrino taking on Modestas Bukauskas. Modestas Bukauskas, last time out that we saw him, he was going up against Zach Pauga. He got a unanimous decision win there, as he should. He also has a win over Tyson Pedro, who Tyson Pedro has looked good, but you got to remember, Tyson Pedro had that really long layoff, a bunch of injuries. And then before that, we're talking about Cage Warriors and outside of the UFC. He does, this is his second stint. He got knocked out of the UFC. You saw there by Khalil Roundtree. He had 3 back-to-back losses in 2021 at light heavyweight. And so now that he's back taking on Victor Petrino, still at light heavyweight, I got to tell you, I don't like this matchup for Modestas Bukauskas. He's been on a decent streak lately, but again, his wins over Tyson Pedro, who's iffy, and Zach Pauga, who's iffy. Victor Petrino is 9-0. He's got a submission victory over Marcin Prochnio, who is no easy competition, no easy timeout. Anton Turkalaj, which is another good fighter, and Rodolfo Bellato, he knocked him out on the Contender Series to get into the UFC here. Now, outside of the UFC, Ghazi Murad Antiglov, 20-8, so a lot of fights under his belt under the UAE Warriors, which is not a bad banner. So 26 years old, 6'2". They're going to be roughly the same size, but Victor Petrino is going to be the much bigger, well-built competitor here. I think he's better on the feet. I think he's got an ability to finish Modestas Bukauskas on the ground that Modestas doesn't, possess the other way. I think Victor is going to be a little bit faster, and being that he's 9-0, he's going to be protecting that record there. So I'm going with Victor Petrino. I think he's got the faster shots, the more powerful shots, and he can actually, win the fight on the ground too if it goes there. So I don't see a modality for Modestas Bukauskas here, but everyone's got a puncher's chance. He's 29 years old, got something to prove. His second time into the UFC, but he hasn't shown any finishing ability in this second stint. Really, not much in his first stint either, going off or getting knocked out by that higher quality competition. And that higher quality competition isn't even the top fives. We're talking about the top 15s and sometimes, in and around there. So I think Victor Petrino is going to go out and get this one done. Again, you got to remember, it's UFC Sao Paulo. He's a Brazilian going up against an iffy competitor. I think this one's pretty clear cut. That's why he's a minus 260 favorite. I'm going Victor Petrino. What do you think, Keith?
I'm personally going to stay away from this one with my wallet because I do think Modestas Bukauskas has looked a lot better on this second run. He's looked more defensive. He wasn't really defensive his second time in the UFC, but now he's developed a little bit more fight IQ as well. I agree with everything that you said about Victor Petrino having like the advantages when it comes to more powerful striking in the ground game and just more of a finishing ability overall. But Modestas Bukauskas has been surprising lately, so I'm just going to stay away from this one. But I like your pick.
Okay. Next fight on the early prelims that I want to talk about is going to be Elijah Zaleski taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov. And I'm going Rinat Fakhretdinov here. I'm going against the Brazilian. A lot of times when they do these cards that are not, they're a fight night card, but it's placed somewhere, a la UFC Sao Paulo, UFC London, those type of cards. A lot of times they're going to put some local talent on the card to showcase them. So a lot of times I'll defer to the person out of the country that the event is being hosted in. Not in the case of Rinat Fakhretdinov. He's minus 285. He's minus 285 for a reason. He fought Kevin Lee in his first fight back. Granted, Kevin Lee is constantly a guy who's too big for 155 and too small for 170, but I don't think anybody was expecting Rinat Fakhretdinov to go out there and make such easy submission work of Kevin Lee, something that's supposed to be Kevin Lee's bread and butter. So we know Rinat Fakhretdinov can get it done on the ground, basically by his last name and the fact that he's out of Russia. But this guy, he has a win over Bryan Battle, who Bryan Battle has looked like a world beater, especially at 170 when he's trimmed down. So having a win over him is absolutely not nothing. And I don't want to say a world beater about Bryan Battle, but Bryan Battle has looked very, very good as of late. I think he won the Ultimate Fighter on 85, dropped down to 70, and has looked much better even there. So, a bunch of decent wins for Rinat Fakhretdinov. And for Elijah Zaleski, he's a Brazilian guy who's got a split decision win over Abubakar Nurmagomedov, which is not something to be taken lightly. He's also got that win over Bernard Saint-Denis. So this is a strong fighter in his own right. He can take a shot. He can return shots. He is going to basically take one to give one. That's shown by his fight with Muslim Salikov, where they constantly traded and he lost by split decision. This is the guy who's going to put himself into harm's way and try and trade with you. And against lesser competition, that can work. We're talking Alexei Kunechko, Benoit Saint-Denis, even though he is a solid caliber fighter. He's not the most technical. He's another guy who's basically the brawler style, is I guess what I'm getting at. And I think Rinat Fakhretdinov is an intelligent enough fighter to not be suckered into a brawling style of matchup. He's also going to have that ground game that he can always revert to if Elijah Zaleski comes in a little bit too close. So I just like the overall skill set and I don't know what I think I want to call it, experience potentially, but ability to just stay calm when a fight gets crazy. I like Rinat's ability to do that, and for that, I'm taking him here as the minus 285 favorite. I think he's going to win this one by decision.
Yeah, there's a reason that Rinat's minus 285 favorite here, because he's just 3 fights into the UFC and he's showing he's got really high fight IQ. He's got good hands, knows when to use them. The ground game is also great. So, I can't really say much more than what you've already said. You hit the nail right on the head. I'm going with Rinat here for all the reasons that you said. Great fight against Kevin Lee. Great fight against Bryan Battle, who is really showing strides since being on the Ultimate Fighter. He's getting better with every fight. Rinat's only 3 fights in, though. Looking forward to seeing what he has to do in the future. So, rolling with you on that pick. I like it a lot.
Awesome. As we keep the prelim locks, prelim notables rolling, the last one on the prelims that I want to talk about is going to be Elvis Brenner versus Esteban Ribovics. Esteban is a guy who's going to be making his second or third appearance inside of the UFC, not counting his Contender Series debut against Thomas Paul, where he got the win by a knockout. He took a loss to Loki Radzhabov in his UFC debut via decision. Then he came back and won a decision 2 months ago against Kamwilla Kirk. So not the best level of competition for Esteban this far in his UFC career, but as a near even matchup here for a guy like Elvis Brenner, who's coming out of shoot to box. A couple fights ago, he was outside of the UFC. He made his UFC debut and got the win, a split decision win over Zubaira Tukhugov. I always have trouble with some of these more Russian names. The more consonants, the more an issue for me.
Yeah.
And then the most notable win was 2 months ago, a knockout win over Guram Kutulidze. And Guram looked maybe not 100% himself in that fight, but I don't want to discount what Elvis Brenner was able to go out there and do, go out and shut down the complex Rubik's Cube that is Guram Kutulidze, a guy who's well accomplished on the ground, has a lot of interesting leg attacks and leg kicks, and he's long as well, and he's quick, and he has really good cardio. So for Elvis Brenner to go out there and finish a guy like that, it puts a lot of faith for me in his overall ability. He's going to be the longer guy here. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage, probably about the same build as Esteban, but I like how he's quick. I like how he's durable, and I like that he can throw punches in quick succession that's going to knock guys out. I think Esteban Ribovics, he hasn't faced that great of competition, and inside the UFC, he's fought into a lot of decisions. I think his knockouts have came against a much lesser quality of opponent than he's fought inside of the UFC. Now, while he still has the power to knock people out, I think Elvis Brenner being in there with a guy like Guram Kutulidze is going to prove everything that's need to be proven, that he's going to be able to stay away from the power of Esteban Ribovics coming back, and he's going to be able to deliver either a knockout blow or actually, at least have the majority of the successful exchanges in this fight. So I'm going with Elvis Brenner either by knockout or by decision to get this one done.
Yeah, I love the pick. Elvis Brenner, that win against Guram Kutulidze. Big W, Kutulidze. Like you said, he's a Rubik's Cube, a lot to figure out. Crazy fighting style, just like super catches guys off guard when he transitions into the grappling from the striking super fast. And Elvis Brenner went out there. He brought the fight to Guram. He's going to do the same thing against Esteban this week. So, yeah, I'm going with Elvis Brenner. I just think he showed strong hands, and he hasn't really had a chance to show off whether or not he has like real jiu-jitsu or not, and real finishing power when it comes to the submission game. So, I expect maybe that to be a factor this week as well. So I'm going with Elvis Brenner. I like the pick a lot.
Sweet. With that being said, we just got through everything on the prelims that we needed to get through. Now it is time for our main card picks. All right, main card. Starting us off, one of the Bonfim brothers, Ismael Bonfim, taking on Vince Pichel. Not often is there a 13-year age gap in a UFC main card event, but here we are. 5'8" Ismael Bonfim, 71-inch reach, 156 pounds was the last time he weighed in. 27 years old, out of Brazil, a minus 440 heavy favorite over Vince Pichel. Looking at his 5-on-in for Ismael Bonfim, undefeated up until his most recent bout. Decision. He knocked out Terrence McKinney, showing that he absolutely does have power, but he lost to Benoit Saint-Denis. There was a back-and-forth battle. He was landing a lot of good shots on Benoit Saint-Denis, and eventually Saint-Denis, we talked about his durability in one of the more recent fights that we discussed. He was able to come back and get that submission on Ismael Bonfim. I think that was more of a blip on the radar for the 27-year-old than it is indicative of what his overall skill set is. And when he's taking on a guy like Vince Pichel, who's 2-5 over his, or 2-3 over his last 5, he's got losses via submission to Gregor Gillespie and Mark Madsen. He lost by decision. Mark Madsen, obviously infamous for being named the Olympian, because he has a bronze medal in the Olympics for grappling, Greco-Roman, I believe. Wins over Austin Hubbard, Jim Miller, and Roosevelt Roberts are really what are the claim to fame for Vince Pichel at this part of his career. And I think those are vastly different opponents than what Ismail Bonfim is going to bring to the table. I think Roosevelt Roberts, Jim Miller, and Austin Hubbard are a little bit slower and a little bit older in their career here. I think Ismail Bonfim is going to be quicker. He's got that grappling base. I don't think he's going to finish Vink Pichel just so much. I think even though he did knock out Terrence McKinney, I think Vince Pichel is intelligent enough at this point in his career to avoid some of the bigger shots. I don't think Ismail Bonfim is going to be throwing anything too wild and too crazy at him. So I'm going with Ismail Bonfim to get this one via decision, get back on the right side of things.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think it's going to be an Ismail Bonfim decision victory here for a lot of the reasons that you stated. But I think that this is a setup fight in a way for Ismail to win a decision victory because Vince Pichel is super durable, super intelligent, and if he takes one, he gives one right back. And that's what I think the UFC is expecting from this fight is just a 3-round battle, hoping to open up the main card with some fireworks and maybe a finish here. But I think just because of the chins on both of these guys and Vince Pichel's almost like unwillingness to grapple, he likes to keep things standing and exciting. It's going to be a fun fight to start off the main card with, but Ismail being the younger, quicker fighter, he's going to land more shots throughout the duration of the fight and potentially land a little bit more damage, and open up some of that scar tissue that Vince Pichel has across his forehead. So, like you said, I'm going with Ismail Bonfim by decision. A little bit of a heavy favorite here, but if you pick the decision method, then it'll sweeten the line for you. So I'm rolling with you on that pick.
And if you are going to pick a method of how he's going to win this one, I think decision is what I think is going to happen most likely because everything you said, Vince Pichel is durable. He is intelligent. He does have good fighter IQ. He does, put himself into harm's way. That's how he got all of that scar tissue. But generally, he's got that really good chin to be able to do it. Ismail Bonfim, I think, if he's not going to get the decision victory, I think he's going to knock him out, though. I think, some of those punches, it was enough to overwhelm and eventually put out Terrence McKinney. So I think we could potentially see the same thing here. Vink Pichel maybe gets a little bit of blood in the eyes, not see another shot coming. He's quick, a lot of successive follow-up shots. Could see this one end in TKO. I just think it's your second most likely outcome if you're an Ismail Bonfim better. That's at least what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, out of the 3 ways it could end, outside of like a doctor's stoppage, which we saw some ridiculous ones on that Abu Dhabi card. But yeah, I agree, potentially he knocks him out, but you look at the Terrence Kinney knockout, and Terrence Kinney does not have a fight style conducive to breaking into like any sort of ranking or becoming a true contender. He'll be exciting. He'll be a name that we know, but he gets too wild and he was up against the cage in a situation where Vince Pichel is going to put his hands up and try and get out of that situation. Instead, Terrence starts winging punches and gets caught with a flying knee.
Right.
That from Vince Pichel. I hope not. At least Vince Pichel is fun. Older guy, you don't want to see a guy like that get his lights put out. Just keep having fighting and keep putting on fun fights.
Same thing with like we didn't enjoy watching Frankie Edgar get knocked out,
right?
But I just think the knockout is more likely than Bonfim going out there and submitting Vince Pichel.
Absolutely, 100% sure that they're going to throw hands more than anything. All right, you ready for Rodolfo Vieira versus Armen Petrosyan?
Yeah, Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan. I feel like I've been taking the opening lines. I'll pass this one to you to discuss real quick.
Well, I'm a big Armen Petrosyan guy, so I don't mind kicking it off on this one. I think he's got some of the best kickboxing, just so technical. And he's making his way up in the UFC right now. He's got a couple of wins to start off with, one loss, I believe, in the UFC. And that was to Caio Borralho, who was also on this card. We were talking about that before, but and that was a great fight. Well, it had like some weird stuff, like some nut taps and stuff like that. But since then, he's just been, defending takedowns and out kickboxing guys to decisions since he's gotten into the UFC, since that Caio Borralho fight. Really uses legs really well. Great kicks. Great body kicks, great leg kicks. And he always has his opponents thinking he doesn't have like real finishing power just yet. He has stunned guys. He tends to be a little bit more cautious when he stuns people rather than trying to jump in and get the finish because he knows grappling isn't his strong suit. But he is good at defending takedowns, especially like he learned a bit from that Caio Borralho fight. So for all those reasons, I'm going to go with Armen Petrosyan over Rodolfo Vieira. Rodolfo Vieira being like more of a in your face type of guy, and Armin Petrosian being more of like the technical kickboxing, likes to counter, likes to look for angles, stay on the outside a bit more. So Armin Petrosian, I think I'm by decision this week. What do you like, Tom?
Yeah, it's interesting because Rodolfo Vieira, he's the black belt hunter. He doesn't have great stand up. What he's going to try and do is take you down. And, when he's against guys who have strong takedown defense, or even better yet, I would say an ability to keep distance to where Rodolfo Vieira can't shoot that takedown, especially as it gets later in the fight. And those takedowns from distance take more and more energy that you don't have. I think it's more and more difficult for Rodolfo Vieira to be successful. Armin Petrosian, he's a guy who he's 6'3", but he's going to have a 2-inch reach disadvantage to Vieira. He's a guy who's long in the legs, and you mentioned it, that he's got really great kicks and the ability to keep distance, move around the cage. He's got that kickboxing background, but he also has some solid takedown defense. I think Armin Petrosian is going to keep his distance for the first round and really try to tire out Vieira by him moving in close, use some of those kicks to keep him at range. Now, on the off event that Rodolfo Vieira can get in, I don't want to necessarily off event, maybe I misspoke, but in the event that Rodolfo Vieira can get inside, I think that's where Armin Petrosian is going to be most vulnerable to some like clinch shots, dirty boxing, and obviously the takedown attempt. So if this fight does go to the ground, I think Vieira then swings a lot in his corner. But being roughly about the same age here, having the background in jiu-jitsu and grappling that Rodolfo Vieira does, I think definitely if the fight goes to the ground, swings it for him. I just think Armin Petrosian is good at stand-up, good at keeping his distance. And, you talk about that fight. He fought Christian Leroy Duncan, which is a unanimous decision win. He fought AJ Dobson. Kyle Barallo, he did take him down, but he was able to be gritty in there. And it was a decision which he lost. But I think he's learned from that. And like you said, he's looked a lot better following that fight. He's 33 years old, so this is about his peak there. And he's coming over from kickboxing. So he still has a lot to learn when it comes to takedown defense and grappling. So I think that's what we'll see improve the most in his fights following or as he goes on in his career. So I'm going Armin Petrosian. I think he's going to be able to stop the takedowns of Rodolfo Vieira. And Rodolfo Vieira, for a guy who is so grappling heavy, it's kind of his real Achilles heel, that his takedowns aren't fantastic. If the fight ends up on the ground, then he's in his home. But he hasn't been traditionally stellar at getting guys to the ground. So I think that's a fundamental weakness for Rodolfo Vieira. So I'm going with Armin Petrosian for those reasons.
Yeah, dude, I love the pick, and like I said, I'm a huge Armin Petrosian fan. So it'll be nice to see him get continue on this win streak, make it 3 in a row. I'm looking forward to it.
Abus Magomedov taking on Kyle Barallo. Now, this is a fantastic fight that probably should be in the co-main event. You're looking at a guy in Kyle Barallo who's looked dominant in his UFC tenure here, knocking out Jesse Murray to get into the contender series, or on the contender series to get into the UFC. And then he's got a decision win over Gadzio Margadziev, who was 13-0. And at the time, right now, it doesn't look back super impressive, but at the time, coming in and your UFC debut, where everyone expects you to have, this shock to being in the big show and have this fall off in your potential, go out and get a decision win over an undefeated guy. He's got the win over Armin Petrosian that we just sung his praises. So against a grappler and a judo thrower like Gadzio Margadziev, to a striker like Armin Petrosian, to a Mahmoud Muradov type who could do it all, and then onto a Michael Olajacek, another guy who is grappling heavy if it comes there, but a strong boxer, and he goes out there and he submits him. Kyle Barallo is passing every single test. I feel like he's bigger than I imagine him. I feel like he's 5'9", 5'10", 5'11", but he gets in there 6'1". He can really stand with anybody. He's got really good kickboxing and striking style, but he's strong as shit when it comes to the ground. He has really good submissions. This guy is just super, super well-rounded, and I think he's really going to be the future of this UFC 185-pound middleweight division. I think there's a lot to be said about Kyle Barallo. Now, Abus Magomedov is no slouch in and of himself. He's got Megomedov in his last name, so he's got a decent grappling prowess. He doesn't show it a lot, but he's mainly a striker. He went out there and he got knocked out by Sean Strickland, which was a fantastic performance by Sean Strickland. I think Kyle Barallo going out there and going to show kind of that diverse skill set. I think it actually will probably be a better showing for Abus Magomedov than he had against Sean Strickland, because Sean Strickland is so awkward that you are able to sometimes, it's a little bit more difficult to figure out Sean Strickland, because he's fighting and he's constantly coming at you. You're constantly on the back foot. But I think with Kyle Barallo having the ground ability that he does, I think it's going to make it harder for Abus Magomedov to move forward, stand his ground, and kind of execute on the game plan that he wants to. He's going to have a 3-inch reach advantage here, but I think Kyle Barallo, again, a guy who's willing to get in there and grapple and maybe even prefers doing that. I think that's going to be a big weakness of Abus Magomedov, who, despite the last name, he can grapple, but I think this is going to be Kyle Barallo's that's going to be the area of the fight where Kyle Barallo is going to shine, is in the grappling. And I think Abus Magomedov, even though he's got a pretty good kickboxing style, I think against Kyle Barallo, he's a minus 375 favorite for a reason, and I'm just seeing every reason why Kyle Barallo is really good and deserving of that minus 375. But what I would say about Abus Magomedov is that if he is able to keep Kyle Barallo at a distance, he can use that reach advantage to potentially pick him apart on the feet. He wasn't able to do it to Sean Strickland, but if he is able to do it to Kyle Barallo, he is able to settle into his game plan where he gets Kyle Barallo moving on the back foot. Maybe he throws a couple knees, maybe he throws a couple elbows or some uppercuts that deters a takedown attempt from Kyle Barallo coming forward, and he's able to then move forward. Abus Magomedov is, and use some of those leg kicks and the quick kickboxing. I do think he's going to have a little bit of an advantage in the striking when it comes to more of a leg kicking or like a karate style skill set. So I wouldn't count. I think Kyle Barallo still has the advantage when it comes to the grappling and the overall fight. But I think in a particular situation where Kyle Barallo isn't able to land the takedown and it becomes just a one-dimensional striking battle, I think Abus Magomedov, because of the reach advantage, I would actually kind of lean towards him. But again, that's one specific situation. Generally speaking, 8 times out of 10, I'm going with Kyle Barallo to get it done, especially in front of the Brazilian fans. What do you think, Keith?
Yeah, I like what you said about him potentially being the future of 185 because it does possess such a unique skill set and he's good at everything. What we're starting to see now is where there's true mixed martial artists. There's not so many guys that are just great specialists. He's good at everything. And Abus, any faith I had in him would have been rattled by that Sean Strickland fight because he kind of just looked like he gave up against Sean Strickland. Took a couple of bad shots against the fence and then just folded. But, as we know, Sean Strickland doesn't really have like knockout finishing power. He just strikes me as the guy that, like, when the going gets tough, he just kind of gives up. And it's going to be tough against a guy like Kyle Barallo, who is going to be in his face. He's going to be, shooting double legs up against the cage and, looking to scoop and dump Abus Magomedov and then lay on some ground and pound, maybe clinch against the cage and just, drive those shots that, ended the fight against, or that ended the fight for Sean Strickland against Abus. And then, just the jiu-jitsu, we haven't really gotten to see jiu-jitsu out of Kyle Barallo. We've seen the ground game and good offensive wrestling, but we haven't really seen, him become a submission, tactician quite yet. We're waiting for that. And I think a guy like Abus Magomedov, who is pretty long, sure, like we know he has a bit of a ground game because of where he's from and everything, but it'll be interesting to see, like, when Kyle Barallo does eventually take him down, what he can do with him on the ground. And I think that in front of a Brazilian fan base, Kyle Barallo is going to be hyped up. He's a pretty vocal guy. He's spoken to the media. He seems to have like a personality and gets amped up when people are on his side and cheering for him. So, with all that being said, definitely going with Kyle Barallo. Again, like you said, he's the favorite that he is for a very good reason. So definitely going Kyle Barallo. I think he's going to finish Abus Magomedov. Just don't know how, because he does have good punch power and he does have the ground game. So, remains to be seen. But I like Kyle Barallo a lot against Abus Magomedov this week. So.
All right, moving on up the card, we got Rodrigo Nascimento, Dontel Mays in the rematch fight that nobody asked for and nobody still wants. Rodrigo Nascimento got a submission win over Dontel Mays 3 years ago, and since then has been 2-1-1. He had a knockout loss 2 years ago to Chris Dawkins, came back, knocked out Alan Badeau. That was later overturned because I believe he popped for roids or potentially marijuana. And then he got a win over Tanner Boser, which I don't think is anything to scoff at. Tanner Boser, who's still been on a slide. I think he's a better fighter than his reputation shows. And then he's got a split decision win over Ayer Latifi. Rodrigo Nascimento has not had the power since having that no contest or that draw. But Dontel Mays, he has a win over Rick Martinez, a Rick over Josh Parisian, which even though it's elbows from crucifix, I feel like Josh Parisian is really makes that win discounted. He had a overturned fight against Hamdi Abdelnahab. Hamdi won, but then overturned for steroids. He lost to Augusto Sakai, which 6 months ago is not a good version of Augusto Sakai to be losing to. So I don't like that for him. And he knocked out Andrei Arlovsky. It was bound to happen. Andrei Arlovsky was 46 years old. So Dontel May is not a great story and a great legacy kind of between these two fights. Rodrigo Nascimento, again, for him, he's got the win, then he loses, then he pops, and then he's got 2 wins over lesser competition, or actually better competition than Dontel Mays has fought. But they were split decision, very close wins. I think Rodrigo Nascimento has a better chin. I don't know which of these guys has more power. Probably Dontel Mays, but I think Rodrigo Nascimento, I think he's going to get this one done. I think he's a better fighter. I think he's fought better competition, even without steroids, even at a little diminished version of him. I'm going with Rodrigo Nascimento to get it done in front of the Brazilian crowd. I think Dontel Mays is a guy who's been able to stick around, but neither of these guys are really going to be contending for, a heavyweight strap in anywhere near future. I think these are guys to help fill a card, and you got Nascimento in Brazil. Put him, pretty high there on the card. Put a guy against Dontel Mays that we know that he's probably going to get a win. So I like at minus 220. I like Rodrigo Nascimento to get this one done.
Yeah, I agree. Not much more to say outside of what you already said. The home crowd is a big thing. I think that the UFC is hoping that somebody goes to sleep in this one. You have heavyweights that can bang, not like super powerful or anything. So maybe it lasts a little bit longer. But I think they're hoping that there's a finish in this one because we're 3 fights out from the main event. You want to keep things exciting rolling on the main card. Otherwise, can't really see much reason why this would be so high up. I'm with you on the Rodrigo Nascimento fight pick. Just want to touch on Chris Daukaus. Like, remember when Chris Daukaus knocked him out, and Chris Daukaus was like the next big world beater, and now he doesn't even have a division that he's like stable in. Crazy to think how guys come and go like that. But going with Rodrigo Nascimento here. What do we got next?
Co-main, Gabriel Bonfim this time against Nicholas Dalby. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, I like Nicholas Dalby a lot. He's interesting and entertaining for numerous reasons, right? Like, he's more on his back foot, but he strikes well off his back foot. And his breathing is the one thing that I always tend to notice. Like, he does like that, who's the Dutch fella, that did pancreas back in the day? Bas Rutten breathing techniques while he's fighting. So he always looks exhausted, but he's in there and he's throwing and, tends to be the guy on his back foot more, and I don't think that bodes well against Gabriel Bonfim. I think Gabriel is the better of the 2 brothers. He has more finishing power. Ismail has great finishing power too, but Gabriel is just he's super strong. And Nicholas Dalby, even though he likes to be on his back foot, the second he puts his back up against the cage, he's fighting for his life. He's done that a few times. We saw him do that against Dirty Bird, what's his name? Dirty Bird.
Tim Means.
Tim Means, yes. We saw him do that against Tim Means, and Tim Means beat him in that fight. So I don't think that bodes well for him here against Gabriel Bonfim. As long as Nicholas Dalby is stepping backwards, Gabriel Bonfim is going to keep going forwards and, just light him up with shots. So I'm going with Gabriel Bonfim to win this one. It's going to be an exciting fight, though, because Nicholas Dalby is pretty competitive. What do you think, Tom?
Yeah, I'm going with Gabriel Bonfim. I think Nicholas Dalby, just like you said, he fights moving backwards a lot of the times. He's able to, sometimes we talk about fighters who force people into fighting their fight. Nicholas Dalby is not that kind. He is not a guy who's going to force you to fight his fight. You may end up, he may end up moving backwards. He adapts to how you're fighting, and I don't think he necessarily always adapts well. And against a guy like Gabriel Bonfim, who's going to move forward, who has the ability to submit you and knock you out at the same time, there's so many things to be thinking about and worried about that I think Nicolas Dalby is going to be overwhelmed. He's constantly going to be moving back. Probably see him doing a lot of that hand jabby, tippy tap thing to try and get the distance. But as Gabriel keeps moving from side to side, in, out, I think it's going to be hard for Dalby to get his shots off. And then eventually he's going to find himself up against the cage and then contending with, do I want to be hit with an overhand? Am I going to get ripped to the body, or am I going to get taken down? And I think the way that Gabriel's going to be able to mix it up with such speed, being 26, having a 12-year and almost a 13-year age advantage here, I think it's all going to be Gabriel Bonfim. He's Brazilian in front of his home crowd, minus 395. I feel comfortable with 395. I think 395 by finish. You probably doesn't move it down much. It's probably still minus 200 or in that area, but I would go Gabriel Bonfim by finish to get it done as my bet in the co-main here.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So then we got main event, Jailton Almeida versus Derek Lewis. And it's an odd one, right? Because Derek Lewis has been losing a bit lately. But then you look at who he's been fighting, and he has losses to Tai Tuivasa and Sergey Pavlovich and Sergey Spivak, making him 2-3 over his last 5. Jailton Almeida knocking everybody out, submitting guys left and right. He's a minus 500 favorite in front of the home crowd. Jailton Almeida, it's interesting, right? Like, he's obviously a great fighter. I'm surprised that he's main eventing this, because it's not like he's a household name.
Brazil. I mean, listen, he fought at 205 and 265, and he submitted and finished everybody in both places. This guy's a freaking phenom, and I think this is serving as a if you don't know, now you know type of moment for Jailton Almeida in front of the Brazilian faithful. Well, they're not even Brazilian faithful. Brazil, they have some of the worst fans, as reported by Dana White. And Dana White and plenty of people say that the Brazilian fans don't stick around for their own. I mean, remember when it was Glover Teixeira? Yeah, I mean, they didn't stick around for his retirement. So people always talk shit about the Brazilian fans. So I don't know if that's actually going to have as much of an impact on this as we're talking about. But nevertheless, I think this is more of a let's show Jailton Almeida. I mean, and this is kind of peeking behind the curtain at who I'm going to pick here. But I think it's going to be like, here's a big name, and here's what this guy did to this guy, and that's why we should be talking about this guy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree with you on that. I just am, typically I feel like they reserve that for like co-main spots. Well, fight nights are a little different, right? We did see Abus Magomedov come out of nowhere and main event against Sean Strickland. So, but with that being said, it's just I'm just more surprised because there's so many Brazilian fighters on the roster. And Jailton Almeida, though, yeah, this is it'll be like a big turning point, big talking point in his career if he can pull off the finish against Derek Lewis, which all signs point yes, except for the fact that Derek Lewis is he's just Derek Lewis.
Derek Lewis.
Yeah, he's got the power. He opened up his last fight with the flying knee. He's showing that he's taking a lot more risks, but calculated risk now. It's not just like, let me wing punches. It's strategic risk. And I like that from Derek Lewis. And him being a plus 300 dog, I can only imagine what Derek Lewis by knockout looks like as a line. It's the unlikely outcome, but it's still very possible. You want to talk about a puncher's chance? Derek Lewis has the biggest puncher's chance out of anybody in the entire UFC. You put him in there against anyone. So as long as it's intelligent Derek Lewis that wants to be in there, because he showed that he wants to be in there too. I was starting to get the vibe that maybe Derek Lewis wasn't motivated to fight anymore. But I think he'll go out there and surprise a lot of people this week. Whether he gets the finish or not, I just think he's gonna land a lot of good shots on Jailton Almeida. More likely that Jailton Almeida finishes the fight, but I'm gonna bet on Derek Lewis this week. So I'm taking Derek Lewis at plus 300. And Derek Lewis by knockout or whatever that may be when that time comes. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm willing to. I'm not going to take Jailton Almeida straight up minus 500. I'm going to take Jailton Almeida. I mean, I guess you can do if you could take him by a finish of knockout or submission, because both of those are live for him here. I'm taking Jailton Almeida by finish. Submission is probably a little bit more likely, but Jailton Almeida by finish, combined with some of those other picks that we have as locks, and that's what's going to make it lucrative for me. I don't think this fight on itself is going to be lucrative because I think the outcome is going to be what we expect it to be. Derek Lewis is going to go in there and try and wing punches. When he does that, I think Jailton Almeida is going to be able to get low enough and lay on his. I mean, listen, he's a guy who has really strong top game and really good takedowns.
Pause.
Yeah, true. Good point. But he's got a really strong ability to be on top in a grappling situation and maintain that top position and basically do whatever he wants to do to you. We're yet to see him come across an opponent that really is able to stop Jailton Almeida in really any area of the fight. You look at this submission. Jairzinho running strike, big puncher, went in there, took him down, rear naked, choked him. Shamil Abdurakhimov, another grappler, knocked him out with ground and pound. Anton Turkalaj, submission. Parker Porter, that's easy, submission. Danilo Marquez knocked him out. Actually, I think I'm going to go Jailton Almeida by submission. It seems like against the bigger power punchers, he's going to be intelligent enough to kind of wait for them to over swing. I think you can get Derek Lewis, who's going to go out there and try to make something big happen. If he tries that knee situation, I think Jailton Almeida is going to be able to get out of the way, take his back, and then do some grappling and find a submission. So I'm going to go with Jailton Almeida to get this one done via submission in the first or the second round. It's a 5-round fight. We know Derek Lewis isn't going to be able to maintain that cardio and stamina, especially not that electrifying type of je ne sais quoi that he's going to bring to a fight. We're not going to see that in the 4th and the 5th. I know we have in the past, but again, we're talking about an old Derek Lewis who, yeah, maybe he could always swing a punch and knock someone down, but I would be willing to bet that Jailton Almeida is a better grappler at this point than Curtis Blaydes even is in the heavyweight division. He's done it at 205. He's doing it at 265. I think he's a better grappler. He's certainly a better finisher. So I think Jailton Almeida, and also he's jacked. He looks like he's an experiment. He might as well be the second coming of Yoel Romero, but just Brazilian instead of Cuban. So Jailton Almeida, I think he's going to get this done via however the hell he wants, probably by submission, probably in the 1st or 2nd round. But if you want to play it a little bit safer, take Jailton Almeida by finish, KO or submission, and pair that with a couple of the other fights that we talked about already, and we're going to talk about in our pick rundown. But before I move to the pick rundown, Keith, what do you think of that? And anything else that I missed?
No. I love the pick. I'm with you. I think that it's definitely the safe bet that Jailton Almeida by finish, Jailton Almeida by submission. Love to see what that line is going to look like further on in the week when they start dropping those on all the major books as we get close to the fight. And I think I might be a little bit split here, right? I might go Derek Lewis, one bet Derek Lewis by knockout, and hedge that with Jailton Almeida by submission, and just hope that one of those bets. It would be kind of wild if Derek Lewis then turned around and got a submission or something. That won't happen, but then you lose both bets. But yeah, I'm going with Derek. No, I'm gonna go with Jailton Almeida. But I will be betting on Derek Lewis. So you want to wrap it up? Do our pick rundown?
Yeah, pick rundown.
Do it.
All right, I will pass it over to you to run it down first with your picks for this card, UFC Sao Paulo.
Dope. All right, I got Denise Gomez by knockout over Angela Hill. I got Renat Fakhretdinov over Alizu Zaleski. I got Elvis Brenner over Esteban Rabovich. And on the main card, I got Ismail Bonfim over Vince Pichel by decision. I got Armin Petrosian over Rodolfo Vieira. I got Caio Barallo over Abus Magomedov, potentially by a finish. I got Rodrigo Nascimento over Dontel Mays, but I'm not really going to touch that one with my wallet. I got Gabriel Bonfim over Nicholas Dalby. And then I got Jailton Almeida by finish over Derek Lewis with a slight hedge on Derek Lewis by knockout. What do you got?
I got Denise Gomez getting the win by finish over Angela Hill. I got Modestas Bukauskas losing to Victor Petrino by finish. And I got Renat Fakhretdinov beating Elijah Zaleski, and Elvis Brenner getting the victory over Esteban Ribovics. Moving on to the main card, Ismail Bonfim is going to get the victory over Vince Pichel, potentially by submission. Yeah, potentially by submission. Yeah, I don't know. I would just take that generally, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. There's such a diversity into Ismail Bonfim's game that it's hard to pick a particular area where it could finish. Armin Petrosian, I think, is actually going to win by decision. Kyle Barallo, I think, is going to win by submission. Rodrigo Nascimento, Dante Almeida. I'm taking Rodrigo Nascimento by decision, but I think the safer bet is to take that fight goes to decision overall. Gabriel Bonfim, I think, is going to get the win over Nicholas Dalby by submission. And I think Jailton Almeida is going to get probably a submission win over Derek Lewis. So, yeah, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I think we're going to see a lot of submission victories, kind of a club and sub type of situation on this card.
Yeah, I would like that. All righty. Just want to say thank you to everybody that was in here with us on this Sunday. Enjoy football. There's a couple of mortal locks out there. Hit up our boys that do the football stuff every now and then over here. But you could also follow us on Twitter at pickinfightstom, at pickinkeith. Please like, comment, and subscribe on the videos. If you're in here, jump in the chat. Follow us. Oh, yeah, it's X. It's not Twitter anymore. I always forget. Check us out on Spotify. We got audio, video on Spotify. If you want to listen to us in the car on your morning walk or something. And, leave us a comment. Let us know what you think of the picks if you're watching this in post. Just want to say thanks again for everybody that was here. Thank you, Tom, for taking time out of your Sunday being here. And enjoy the rest of your weekend.
All right. Keep kicking, everybody. Peace out.